Welcome to Hawkins, Indiana, a place that seems ordinary on the surface, but hides extraordinary secrets beneath. This quiet Midwestern town became ground zero for events that would shake reality itself, where children on bicycles would face horrors from another dimension, where a girl with a shaved head and mysterious powers would change everything, and where the fabric between worlds would grow dangerously thin. What began as the simple disappearance of a 12-year-old boy would spiral into something far more sinister, revealing government conspiracies, interdimensional gateways, and creatures that should never have existed. The story of Stranger Things is one of friendship forged in fire, of ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances, of a town that would never be the same. It's a journey through 4 seasons of escalating danger, each chapter building upon the last, each revelation more terrifying than what came before. From the flickering Christmas lights that spelled out messages from beyond to the neon glow of a doomed shopping mall, from the shadowy tentacles of an ancient evil to the gothic horror of a cursed house, Hawkins has seen it all. And through it all, a group of kids refused to give up, refused to let the darkness win, even when the cost became almost too much to bear. The tale begins in an era of arcade games and walkie-talkies, of Dungeons and Dragons campaigns that stretched late into the night, of a simpler time before the internet connected everyone, but when friendships meant everything. The year is 1983, and life in Hawkins moves at its own gentle pace. Families gather for dinner, kids ride their bikes through tree-lined streets, and the biggest concerns seem to be school, bullies, and whether you'll get to the arcade before your friends. But beneath this veneer of suburban tranquility, something has been growing, something that would soon tear through the comfortable illusion of safety. The Hawkins National Laboratory sits on the outskirts of town, a massive complex that most residents barely notice anymore. Run by the Department of Energy, or so the official story goes. The lab has been conducting experiments for years. Experiments that delve into realms that most people couldn't imagine. Deep within its concrete walls, scientists push the boundaries of human capability, exploring the reaches of the mind, searching for something that could give their country an edge in the endless Cold War. They have been testing children, dozens of children with special abilities, pushing them further and further, all in the name of national security. These aren't willing volunteers, not really. They're prisoners with numbers instead of names, raised in isolation, their powers cultivated like crops in a field. And in November of 1983, one of their experiments goes catastrophically wrong. A gateway opens, a doorway to someplace else, somewhere dark and hungry. The scientists call it an alternate dimension, but that clinical terminology doesn't capture the truth of what they've unleashed. They've punched a hole through to a nightmare realm where the rules of nature don't apply, where predators have evolved in total darkness, where life itself has taken forms that defy comprehension. Season 1, The Vanishing of Will Byers. The first inkling that something has gone wrong comes on the evening of November 6th. 4 boys sit around a table in Mike Wheeler's basement, engaged in an epic Dungeons and Dragons campaign that's already lasted 10 hours. Mike Wheeler, Lucas Sinclair, Dustin Henderson, and Will Byers are best friends, the kind of tight-knit group that only childhood can forge. They speak in their own language of references and inside jokes, their friendship a fortress against the casual cruelties of middle school. Will serves as the party's wizard, thoughtful and creative, perhaps the gentlest soul among them. As the campaign reaches its climax, Mike's mother calls down that it's time for everyone to go home. The boys reluctantly pack up, making plans to continue the next day. Will pedals his bike through the darkening streets of Hawkins, the forest path a route he's taken 1,000 times before. But tonight is different. Tonight, something is waiting. His bicycle light flickers and dies. In the sudden darkness, Will hears something. A sound that doesn't belong to any animal he knows. He pedals faster, his heart hammering in his chest, but whatever is pursuing him is faster still. He abandons his bike and runs for his house, bursting through the door and racing to the shed in the backyard, desperately searching for some place to hide, for anything he might use as a weapon. The door to the shed opens, revealing not his worried mother or brother, but something else entirely. Something with no face. Something that shouldn't exist. The lights flicker wildly, and then Will Byers vanishes from the world he knows, snatched into a realm of cold and shadow, leaving behind only questions and a family that will stop at nothing to find him. Joyce Byers discovers her son is missing the next morning when she tries to wake him for school. The panic sets in immediately, that primal terror that every parent fears. She contacts Police Chief Jim Hopper, a man carrying his own weight of tragedy after losing his young daughter to cancer. Hopper initially treats it as a routine case, assuring Joyce that kids run away all the time, that Will probably just went to his father's house. But Joyce knows her son, knows he wouldn't leave without telling her, knows something terrible has happened. Her insistence pushes Hopper to begin a real investigation, and what they find at the forest's edge chills them to the bone. Will's bicycle, abandoned on the path, a clear sign that he didn't run away but was taken. While the adults begin their search, Will's 3 friends refuse to sit idle. Mike, Lucas and Dustin take to their bikes, combing the woods with flashlights, calling Will's name into the darkness. Instead of finding their friend, they discover something equally impossible. A girl, barefoot and shivering in the rain, dressed in a hospital gown, her head shaved completely bald. She's terrified, barely able to speak, but when Mike asks her name, she lifts her arm to reveal a tattoo on her wrist, the number 11. The boys sneak her back to Mike's house, hiding her in the basement, and slowly coax her story from her fragmented explanations. Her name is 11, or L for short. She escaped from the bad place, from the laboratory on the edge of town, and somehow, impossibly, she knows about Will. She knows where he is, or at least that he's in terrible danger. 11 possesses abilities that seem like they belong in the fantasy games the boys play, not in real life. She can move objects with her mind, can sense things that are happening far away, can do things that defy every law of physics the boys know. When bullies confront them, she effortlessly disarms them, flipping their knives through the air with a thought. When government agents close in, searching for their escaped subject, she flips an entire van over their heads, clearing their escape route. The boys realise they've found someone who might actually be able to help them find Will, someone with powers that could pierce the veil between here and wherever their friend has been taken. But Eleven's connection to Hawkins Lab runs deeper than any of them initially understand. Dr. Martin Brenner, the man she calls Papa, has been conducting experiments on psychic children for years, pushing them to develop and hone abilities that could be weaponized. 11 is the most powerful of all his test subjects, and he will do anything to get her back. Brenner sends his agents out in force, hunting through Hawkins in fake utility vans, questioning anyone who might have seen her, tightening the net around the children. Meanwhile, Joyce Byers is having her own encounters with the impossible. The electricity in her house starts behaving strangely, lights flickering in patterns that seem almost intentional. Then she hears her son's voice, faint and distant, coming through the walls, through the lights themselves. Joyce realizes that Will is trying to communicate with her from wherever he is, using the electrical current as a bridge. She covers her living room walls with Christmas lights, creating an alphabet so Will can spell out messages. The first one sends ice through her veins. R-U-N. A creature is hunting him in this other place, this shadow realm where he's trapped, and it's getting closer. Chief Hopper's investigation takes him to the laboratory, where he confronts Dr. Brenner about the girl who escaped. Brenner is evasive, hiding behind national security classifications, but Hopper's cop instincts tell him that the scientist knows far more than he's saying. When a body is pulled from the quarry, identified as Will Byers, Joyce refuses to believe it's her son. She can still hear him, still feel him reaching out to her. Hopper shares her suspicions and breaks into the morgue, cutting open the body to discover it's a fake, stuffed with cotton batting. Someone is trying to cover something up, trying to make them stop searching, and that means Will might still be alive. Nancy Wheeler, Mike's older sister, is dealing with her own crisis. She attended a party with her boyfriend Steve Harrington, reluctantly bringing along her best friend Barb Holland. But while Nancy went upstairs with Steve, Barb sat alone by the pool, and something took her. Nancy doesn't know what happened, only that her friend has vanished as completely as Will Byers. She teams up with Will's older brother Jonathan, an unlikely alliance between the popular girl and the outsider, and together they begin piecing together the truth. Jonathan had been in the woods that night, taking photographs, and in the background of one image, barely visible behind Barb, is something that doesn't belong, a figure that seems to exist in shadow. The boys, with Eleven's help, begin to understand what they're dealing with. Using her powers, Eleven shows them the creature that took Will, a predator from another dimension that she accidentally contacted during one of her experiments at the lab. Dustin names it the Demogorgon, after a monster from Dungeons and Dragons, and the name sticks. This creature can move between dimensions, creating temporary portals wherever it wants, hunting for prey in both worlds. And somewhere in this other dimension, which the kids dubbed the Upside Down, Will is still alive, still hiding, still surviving against impossible odds. Everything comes together in a final desperate gambit. The adults storm Hawkins Lab, demanding access to the gate that Brenner's experiments opened, the permanent doorway to the Upside Down that sits in the facility's depths. Joyce and Hopper pass through into that nightmare realm, searching through the dark mirror of Hawkins for any sign of Will. They find him in the upside-down version of his house, barely conscious, a tendril of the dimension itself down his throat, feeding on him. They tear him free and rush him back through the gate, back to the light and warmth of the real world. While the adults search the upside down, the kids face their own battle. The Demogorgon comes for them in Mike's house, bursting through the walls with terrible purpose. But it's not them the creature wants. It's 11, drawn to her power like a moth to flame. She faces the monster in the middle school gym, and in a final confrontation that leaves the building shaking, she destroys it, disintegrating both the creature and herself in a blast of psychic energy that leaves nothing but ash and echoes. Will is rushed to the hospital, barely alive but breathing. The doctors work frantically to save him, and against all odds, he pulls through. By Christmas, he's home with his family, laughing with his friends, trying to return to some semblance of normalcy. But the Upside Down has left its mark. In a quiet moment during Christmas dinner, Will excuses himself to the bathroom, and there he coughs up a slug-like creature, watching it squirm down the drain. For a brief moment, the bathroom around him flickers, showing him the dark version of the room, all twisted vines and decay. The Upside Down hasn't let him go, not completely. And elsewhere in Hawkins, in the forest where no one can see, Chief Hopper leaves boxes of Egg or waffles in a hidden box. because he knows something everyone else believes. 11 is still alive, somewhere in the woods, and she's going to need help surviving. Season 2, The Mind Flayer's Reach. Nearly a year passes, and Halloween arrives in Hawkins in 1984. On the surface, life has returned to normal. The boys are a year older, navigating the complicated waters of 8th grade. Will has recovered from his ordeal, or so everyone thinks, but he's still different somehow. Quieter, more withdrawn. He has nightmares that leave him gasping for breath. Visions of a massive shadow entity looming over a lightning-filled sky. These visions feel more real than dreams, as if he's glimpsing something that exists just beyond the edge of perception. His mother takes him to Hawkins Lab, now under new management by Dr. Sam Owens, a man who seems genuinely concerned about Will's welfare. But the doctors can't explain what's happening, can't find any physical cause for the episodes. They call them post-traumatic stress, a psychological echo of his time in the Upside Down. But Will knows it's something more. The visions intensify, becoming longer and more detailed. Will sees himself standing in a desolate landscape, a dark mirror of Hawkins shrouded in red lightning and swirling particles. And there, dominating the sky, like a massive spider, or perhaps something even more alien, is the shadow creature. It sees him too, turns its attention toward him with an intelligence that makes his blood run cold. The thing is aware of him, hunting him across the barrier between worlds. When he returns to reality, he finds that time has passed differently, that what felt like seconds in the vision lasted far longer in the real world. He's losing time, disappearing into these episodes with increasing frequency. Meanwhile, the group dynamics have shifted. A new girl has arrived in Hawkins, Max Mayfield, a skilled skateboarder and video game player with a sharp wit and a troubled home life. She's immediately drawn into the orbit of Mike, Lucas and Dustin, though Mike resents her presence. He's still mourning 11, still checking the radio every night for any sign that she might be trying to contact him. Lucas, on the other hand, develops an immediate crush on Max, as does Dustin, creating a rivalry that threatens to split the group. Max brings with her a stepbrother, Billy Hargrove, a violent teenager with a hair-trigger temper who terrorizes both Max and anyone else who crosses his path. Billy is everything Steve Harrington used to pretend to be. Genuinely cruel, genuinely dangerous, a pressure cooker of rage waiting to explode. What the others don't know is that 11 is alive and has been living in hiding for the past year. Chief Hopper found her in the woods shortly after the events at the school, and he's been harbouring her in his grandfather's old cabin, deep in the forest where no one ever goes. He's trying to keep her safe from the government agents who would take her back to the lab, but the isolation is driving 11 slowly mad. She's a teenager now, restless and angry, desperate to see Mike and her other friends, but forbidden from leaving the cabin. Hopper brings her food, brings her TV dinners and books, and anything else she might need. But what she needs most is human connection. And that's the one thing he can't give her without risking her safety. The tension between them explodes when 11 uses her powers to spy on Mike, watching him through the void, that black space she can access when she covers her eyes. She sees him spending time with Max and feels a stab of jealousy so fierce it surprises her. When Hopper grounds her for using her powers against his explicit orders, she lashes out, using her abilities to unlock all the locked doors in the cabin simultaneously, a display of power that leaves Hopper shaken. The fight escalates, and 11 runs away, desperate to find anyone who might understand her, anyone who might make her feel less alone. Her search leads her to Chicago, where she tracks down Carly Prasad, another former test subject from Hawkins Lab who escaped years before. Carly goes by the number 8 now, leading a gang of young outcasts who use her illusion casting powers to exact revenge on the people who wronged them. Kaylee offers 11 a place with them, a chance to embrace her anger and use her powers without restraint. For a moment, 11 is tempted, but when she uses her powers to find her friends, she sees them in mortal danger, sees the shadow creature she once barely glimpsed now fully manifesting in Hawkins. She realises that the fight isn't over, that running away solved nothing. She has to go back, has to help the people she loves, even if it means risking her freedom and her life. Back in Hawkins, Will's condition has deteriorated dramatically. During a trip to a nearby pumpkin patch, he collapses, and when he wakes, he's different. The shadow entity has found a way through, has possessed him, using his body as a bridge between dimensions. Will becomes a spy for the creature, which Dustin dubs the Mind Flayer after another Dungeons and Dragons monster, one that enslaves entire species by taking control of their minds. The Mind Flayer can see through Will's eyes, can hear through his ears, and it uses this connection to hunt down anyone who threatens it. Hopper discovers something else. Tunnels spreading beneath Hawkins like a massive underground network. All of it grown from the upside down. All of it connected to the Mind Flayer. The tunnels are breeding grounds for creatures that resemble the Demogorgon, but are smaller, more numerous, more coordinated. Dustin discovers one of these creatures as a tiny polywog, names it D'Artagnan or Dart for short, and tries to keep it as a pet before realising what it truly is. The Demodogs, as the kids name them, molt and grow rapidly, transforming into killing machines with rows of blade-like teeth. They're the Mind Flayer's soldiers, an army waiting to be deployed. Nancy and Jonathan, still processing Barb's death and their guilt over surviving when she didn't, decide to expose the truth about Hawkins Lab. They track down Murray Bauman, a conspiracy theorist who believes the government is hiding something in Hawkins. Together they create a package of evidence that proves the laboratory's negligence led directly to Barb's death, and they leak it to the press. The story breaks nationally, forcing the lab into damage control mode, but it also serves a larger purpose. It forces Sam Owens to take the threat seriously, to mobilise resources to combat the spreading contamination from the upside down. Joyce Byers gets a boyfriend, Bob Newby, a sweet-natured manager of the local Radio Shack who was in the AV club with her in high school. Bob is earnest and kind, everything Hopper isn't, and he treats Joyce and her sons with genuine affection. He's also brilliant with technology and puzzles, a skill that becomes crucial when the Mind Flayer tightens its grip on Will. The group realises they need to interrogate Will to find out the Mind Flayer's plans without letting the entity know what they're doing. They take him to Joyce's shed, cover the walls so he can't see where he is, and tie him to a chair. What follows is a harrowing attempt to reach the real Will through the thing wearing his face. The Mind Flayer fights them every step of the way, making Will scream that he wants to be released, making him thrash against his restraints with unnatural strength. But Joyce persists, telling stories about Will's childhood, about his love of art, about the rainbow spaceship he drew when he was 8. Slowly, painfully, Will fights his way back to the surface, using Morse code to tap out messages against the chair arm when the Mind Flayer isn't paying attention. He spells out CLOSEGATE, confirming what they'd suspected. The only way to stop the Mind Flayer is to seal the doorway between dimensions, to cut it off from our world completely. But closing the gate requires getting to it, and the gate is in Hawkins Lab, now under lockdown as Demodogs swarm through the facility, killing everyone they find. Bob volunteers to reboot the facility's security system, the only way to open the locks that stand between them and escape. He makes it to the basement, navigates through the dark corridors, while Hopper coaches him over the radio, and manages to flip the breakers. The doors unlock, and Joyce, Hopper, and the boys run for the exit. Bob follows, and for a moment, it seems like they might all make it. Then a Demodog rounds the corner, drawn by the sound of Bob's footsteps. Joyce screams for him to run, and he does, sprinting toward the exit where she's waiting. He's almost there, can almost touch her outstretched hand, when 3 more Demodogs burst from the shadows and drag him down. Bob dies in front of Joyce's eyes, torn apart by monsters while saving everyone else. A hero in a sweater vest who deserved so much better than the fate he received. The survivors regroup at the Byers' house, traumatized and desperate. The Demodogs are everywhere now, hunting in packs, and more are being born every minute in the tunnels beneath Hawkins. Mike proposes a desperate plan. They need to kill the Mind Flayer, and to do that, they need to sever its connection to Will. Joyce realizes what that means. They have to exorcise the thing from her son, and they have to do it through heat. The Mind Flayer thrives in the cold, in the frigid temperatures of the Upside Down. Heat will drive it out, even if it means putting Will through agony. They crank up the thermostat, close all the windows, and turn the Byers' house into a furnace. Will screams as the heat intensifies, the Mind Flayer inside him thrashing and fighting, but Joyce holds him through it all, refuses to let him go. Finally, in a rush of shadow and smoke, the thing leaves Will's body, exploding out into the night air in a cloud of living particles that dissipates into the darkness. Will collapses, exhausted but himself again, free from the puppet strings that had been controlling him. While this is happening, Hopper and 11 make their own desperate push. They infiltrate Hawkins Lab through a different entrance, fighting their way to the gate that still yawns wide in the facility's depths. 11 has grown stronger during her year away, has learned to channel her anger more effectively, and she's going to need every ounce of that power now. The gate has grown massive, a swirling wound in reality itself, and through it the Mind Flayer presses, desperate to break through completely. 11 confronts the entity, and for a moment it seems impossible. The thing is so vast, so powerful, ancient beyond measure. But she remembers her mother, remembers what was taken from her, remembers every moment of pain and isolation, and she pours all of that into her power. Blood streams from her nose as she screams, her power reaching out like a massive hand to force the gate closed. Inch by terrible inch, the wound in reality seals, and the Mind Flayer's scream of rage echoes through both dimensions as it's forced back into its prison. With the gate closed and Will freed, the Demodogs lose their coordination. They scatter and die, their connection to their master severed. Hawkins is saved, though the cost has been terrible. The lab is shut down, its experiments ended. Dr. Owens, who genuinely tried to do right, helps Hopper establish a legal identity for 11, giving her the name Jane Hopper and papers that say she's his daughter. She can finally go to school, can finally have a normal life, or as normal as life can be for a girl who can move objects with her mind. The season ends at the Hawkins Middle School Snowball, a formal dance where the kids dress up and navigate the awkward terrain of middle school romance. 11 attends, wearing a dress and her hair grown out, looking like any other teenage girl. Mike sees her across the gym, and the look on his face says everything. They dance to a song about time after time, and for a moment, everything is perfect. But outside, in the upside-down version of the school, the Mind Flayer still looms, watching and waiting. The gate may be closed, but the entity hasn't forgotten. It's patient and it's angry, and it knows that eventually there will be another opening, another chance. All it has to do is wait. Season 3, the summer of 85. Summer arrives in Hawkins, and with it comes changes that feel as significant as anything the Upside Down ever brought. The biggest change is physical. Starcourt Mall has opened on the edge of town, a massive complex of stores and restaurants and entertainment that becomes the instant centre of Hawkins' social life. For the kids, now teenagers navigating the complicated world of high school relationships, the mall is everything. It's where you go to see movies, to play arcade games, to eat ice cream, to just exist in that liminal space between childhood and adulthood. For the adults, particularly the small business owners whose stores line Hawkins' main street, the mall is a death sentence, siphoning away customers with its air conditioning and convenience and sheer scale. Mike and Eleven are officially dating now, much to Hopper's dismay. They spend every possible moment together, usually at Hopper's cabin, usually kissing with the door open exactly 3 inches as per Hopper's strict rules. Hopper finds himself in the uncomfortable position of being a protective father to a teenage girl who can throw him across the room without touching him. When he tries to confront Mike about spending too much time with Eleven, it goes poorly, and he ends up enlisting Joyce's help to manipulate the situation. Mike, following Hopper's threatening advice, delivered in a combination of words and gestures, tells Eleven that he can't see her anymore, claiming his Nana is sick. Eleven, who doesn't have a frame of reference for teenage relationship drama, is devastated. Max steps in, dragging Eleven to the mall for what she calls a crash course in independence. They shop, they laugh, they discover that life doesn't revolve around boys. It's the first real female friendship Eleven has ever had, and it opens her eyes to possibilities she never considered. Max teaches her about standing up for herself, about not accepting behaviour that makes her feel small. Meanwhile, Mike and Lucas are confused and hurt by their girlfriend's sudden coolness, unable to understand what they did wrong, while Dustin returns from science camp, claiming to have a girlfriend named Susie who lives in Utah. None of his friends believe him, which stings more than he wants to admit. Steve Harrington has graduated high school and now works at Scoops Ahoy, an ice cream parlour in the mall, alongside Robin Buckley, a band geek with a sharp tongue and an encyclopedic knowledge of languages. They spend their shifts in matching sailor uniforms, serving ice cream and bickering in a way that slowly builds into genuine friendship. When Dustin returns from camp and realises his friends are too busy with their girlfriends to pay attention to his stories, he seeks out Steve, and their unlikely friendship picks up where it left off. Dustin has brought back a powerful radio antenna that he built at camp, meant to communicate with Susie, across state lines. But when he sets it up on a hill outside town and powers it on, he picks up something unexpected. A Russian transmission. The message is in code, a series of seemingly random phrases that repeat every few hours. Dustin realises this isn't coming from Russia. It's coming from somewhere in Hawkins. He brings the recording to Steve and Robin, and together they begin the painstaking work of translation and decryption. Robin proves instrumental in cracking the code. With her gift for languages, she translates the Russian into English, revealing phrases like, "The silver cat feeds when blue meets yellow in the west," and "A trip to China sounds nice if you tread lightly." At first, the words seem like nonsense, but Robin has a breakthrough. These aren't metaphors or poetry. They're instructions, code names for locations and times within Starcourt Mall itself. The Silver Cat is a delivery company. The trip to China refers to Imperial Panda in the food court. Blue and yellow meeting in the west refers to the clock in the mall's main corridor. where the blue hour hand and yellow minute hand point to a specific time. The Russians aren't just in Hawkins, they're operating out of the mall, using it as cover for something. Steve, Robin, and Dustin recruit Erica Sinclair, Lucas's precocious younger sister, for a mission that requires someone small enough to fit through the mall's ventilation system. She agrees in exchange for free ice cream for life, and her participation proves crucial. She crawls through the ducts to a restricted area, opens a door from the inside, and reveals a freight elevator that descends far deeper than the mall's basement should go. The four of them take the elevator down, expecting to find a small operation, maybe a few people. Instead, they discover a massive underground facility, a Russian base the size of several city blocks, filled with soldiers and scientists and equipment that clearly cost hundreds of millions of dollars. The Russians have been working on recreating the gateway to the Upside Down, building their own version of the technology that Hawkins Lab used. They've constructed a massive machine they call the Key, designed to tear open the barrier between dimensions. But opening a gate from scratch requires immense amounts of power, more than any conventional source can provide. That's why they're in Hawkins specifically. The fabric of reality here is already weakened from the previous gate, making it easier to punch through. The Key has been siphoning power from Hawkins' electrical grid, causing brownouts across town, drawing enough energy to power a small city. Joyce has noticed the power fluctuations, noticed that magnets in her house have stopped working, a sign that something is interfering with electromagnetic fields. She tries to tell Hopper, but he dismisses her concerns, more focused on planning a date with her at a new Italian restaurant. Their relationship has been building slowly over the past year, but Hopper's fear of commitment keeps getting in the way. When Joyce proves that something is genuinely wrong, they investigate together, eventually teaming up with Murray Bauman, the conspiracy theorist who helped Nancy and Jonathan the previous year. Their investigation leads them to a warehouse where they discover Russian soldiers offloading equipment. A fight ensues, and they capture a Russian scientist named Alexei, a physicist working on the Key project. Through Murray, who speaks Russian, Alexei explains the entire operation. The Soviets have been trying to open their own gate for years, attempting to weaponize the Upside Down for the Cold War. They've failed at every location they've tried in Russia because the barriers between dimensions are too strong. But in Hawkins, where a gate already existed, the boundary is tissue thin, and they've been able to force it open. Alexei also reveals something terrifying. When they activate the Key, it doesn't just open a gateway. It acts like a massive electromagnet, pulling on something on the other side, something that wants very badly to come through. That something is the Mind Flayer, and it hasn't forgotten its defeat. It's been waiting, planning, and now it has a new strategy. Instead of possessing one person, it begins possessing dozens, creating a small army of people it can control like puppets. Its first victim is Billy Hargrove, who encounters something at the abandoned steelworks while searching for a woman he was supposed to meet. The Mind Flayer infects him, and Billy becomes its general in the real world, tasked with building an army by infecting others. The possessed people are called the Flayed, a reference to the Mind Flayer's method of control, and they seem almost normal at first, going about their daily lives with only small signs that something is wrong. But they're all connected, all working toward the same goal, preparing for something terrible. Nancy and Jonathan, now working as interns at the Hawkins Post newspaper, stumble onto the story when Nancy investigates a lead about diseased rats. The rats have been eating fertilizer and chemicals, growing aggressive, and then exploding in showers of black goo. It seems like a bizarre environmental story until Nancy realizes the rats are being controlled, forced to consume specific substances, their bodies being used as raw material for something. When she pursues the lead, her misogynistic boss dismisses her concerns, but Nancy refuses to let it go. She and Jonathan discover that the Flayed are gathering at the steelworks, and when they investigate, they witness something horrifying. The infected people are consuming gallons of chemicals and fertilizer, their bodies melting and reforming, combining into something new. The Mind Flayer is building itself a physical body, using the Flayed as building blocks. It's creating a monster out of flesh and bone and stolen humanity, something that can exist in the real world without needing a host. The creature it creates is massive and terrible, a writhing mass of muscle and teeth and grasping appendages that barely resembles anything from nature. It's the Mind Flayer made flesh, and it has one target, 11. The entity remembers her, remembers how she closed the gate, and it wants revenge. It will kill everyone she cares about, make her watch them die, and then it will kill her too. All the various storylines converge in the final days before the 4th of July. Steve, Robin, Dustin, and Erica are captured by Russian soldiers in the underground base and subjected to brutal interrogation. Steve is beaten while demanding to know who they work for. The Russians convince these teenagers must be American spies, rather than kids who stumbled onto something they shouldn't have seen. They're injected with truth serum, a hallucinogenic that makes them giddy and uninhibited, turning their interrogation into something surreal. Dustin manages to contact the others on his radio before the battery dies, and Erica breaks them out of their cell using her small size and determination. Joyce, Hopper, and Murray, with Alexi's help, make plans to infiltrate the Russian base and destroy the key before it can fully open the gate. Alexei, who's developed a fondness for American culture and his captors, becomes something like a friend, particularly to Murray. They go to a 4th of July carnival, and for a moment, Alexei gets to experience the simple joy of winning a carnival game, of eating cherry Slurpee, of being treated like a person rather than a prisoner. Then a Russian assassin named Grigory, who's been hunting them since they took Alexei, shoots the scientist in the chest. Alexei dies with a smile still on his face, and his death galvanizes the others to finish what he started. Elle and the others face the Mind Flayer's creature at the mall, a running battle through stores and corridors as the thing tears through walls in pursuit. Billy, still under the Mind Flayer's control, has Max, trying to bring her to the creature so it can use her as bait to draw out 11. Max pleads with her stepbrother, trying to reach whatever humanity might still exist inside him, reminding him of his mother, of who he was before his father broke him. For a moment, Billy hesitates, his face showing the internal war between the thing controlling him and his own battered will. In the end, love wins. Billy steps between the Mind Flayer and his sister, using his body as a shield, and the creature impales him repeatedly, killing him but giving the others time to escape. In the Russian base, Hopper and Joyce fight their way to the key, a massive machine crackling with barely contained energy. They can see the gate it's opening, see the Mind Flayer pressing against it, so close to breaking through. Turning off the machine requires someone to turn 2 keys simultaneously, and the room is separated by a blast door that slams shut once the sequence is initiated. Hopper ends up on the wrong side, trapped in the room with the key as it begins to overload. He and Joyce share a long look through the window, and he gives her a small nod. She turns the key, and the machine explodes in a blast of energy that incinerates everything in the room, including, as far as anyone can tell, Jim Hopper. With the gate closed and the key destroyed, the Mind Flayer's body loses cohesion, collapsing into a pile of meat and dissolving goo. The Flayed who survived the process are freed, confused and traumatized, but themselves again. Billy Hargrove dies in Max's arms, finally at peace after a lifetime of abuse and anger. The mall is destroyed, burned down in the chaos, though the official story blames a fire rather than admitting the truth. 3 months pass, and the Byers family, along with 11, prepare to move away from Hawkins. Too much has happened here. Too much pain and loss. Joyce needs a fresh start, and 11 needs to be somewhere the government won't think to look for her. Mike and 11 say goodbye, promising to visit each other at Thanksgiving, planning their next reunion even as they're torn apart. Will gives Mike a painting he made, a perfect encapsulation of their friend group, a reminder that some bonds can't be broken by distance. The moving truck pulls away, and Hawkins loses some of its heroes. But in Russia, in a prison camp in Kamchatka, something is stirring. A guard demands a prisoner be brought for feeding, and another guard asks which one. The response is chilling. Not the American. Somewhere in that frozen wasteland, in a cell far from home, Jim Hopper is alive, and he's waiting for a chance to escape. Season 4, The Curse of Vecna. 6 months have passed since the Battle of Starcourt, and Hawkins is trying to heal. The mall remains a burned-out husk, a monument to everything that was lost. The town has changed, grown darker somehow, as if the repeated incursions from the Upside Down have stained it permanently. For the main characters, life has scattered them across the country. The Byers family settled in California with 11, trying to build a normal life in sunny Lenora Hills. Jonathan and Will have enrolled in high school there, navigating the complicated social dynamics of being the new kids. 11, now going by the name Jane, struggles more than anyone. Without her powers, which she lost during the battle with the Mind Flayer, she's just another awkward teenager, and high school proves far more brutal than any monster she's faced. In Hawkins, Mike, Dustin, and Lucas have also started high school, and they've made a controversial choice. They've joined Hellfire Club, a Dungeons and Dragons group led by Eddie Munson, a senior who's loud, dramatic, and the target of constant rumours about Satanism and devil worship. Eddie is harmless, just a metalhead who loves fantasy games and rock music, but the town sees him as dangerous, as other. For the boys, Hellfire Club is a refuge, a place where they can still be kids playing their games, where they can escape the weight of everything they've experienced. Lucas, however, has also joined the basketball team, trying to fit in with the popular crowd, trying to be normal in a way that creates tension with his friends. The basketball team is led by Jason Carver, a golden boy whose perfect life includes being the captain, having the head cheerleader as his girlfriend, and believing wholeheartedly in the American dream. Jason has no idea what really happens in Hawkins, no concept of the horrors lurking beneath the surface, and his ignorance will make him dangerous. In California, 11 is being bullied mercilessly by a girl named Angela, who's decided that Jane makes a perfect target. The bullying culminates at a skating rink, where Angela humiliates 11 in front of everyone, including Mike, who's visiting for spring break. 11, used to defending herself with powers she no longer has, resorts to physical violence, hitting Angela in the face with a roller skate in a moment of explosive rage. The violence shocks everyone, including 11 herself, and she's arrested, facing juvenile detention for assault. It's a low point for someone who's been a hero, a stark reminder that the real world can be just as cruel as the Upside Down in its own ways. Back in Hawkins, something new has started happening, something that terrifies even those who've seen the Upside Down's worst. A cheerleader named Chrissy Cunningham, Jason's girlfriend, has been experiencing disturbing visions. She sees her mother transformed into a monster, sees horrifying images of spiders and decay, hears a grandfather clock, ticking in places where no clock exists. She's terrified, barely sleeping, convinced she's losing her mind. Desperate for anything that might help her feel normal again, she seeks out Eddie Munson, who deals marijuana on the side to make money. They meet at Eddie's trailer in the Forest Hills trailer park, and Chrissy seems to relax for the first time in days. Then the visions return, worse than ever before. Chrissy's eyes glaze over and roll back in her head. She begins to levitate, rising off the floor as invisible forces grip her body. Eddie watches in horror, unable to reach her, unable to help as she floats higher and higher. Her bones begin to snap, her limbs twisting at impossible angles. Her jaw dislocates with an audible crack, and then her eyes cave in, imploding into the sockets, leaving behind dark, empty holes. Chrissy's body drops to the floor, shattered and broken, and Eddie runs, panicking, convinced he'll be blamed for what happened, knowing no one will believe the truth. The next day, Chrissy's death is discovered, and Hawkins erupts in fear and speculation. The police, now led by a detective who transferred in after Hopper's supposed death, immediately suspect foul play. When they discover Eddie's connection to Chrissy, he becomes the prime suspect. Jason Carver, devastated by his girlfriend's death, and consumed by a need for revenge, decides that the police aren't moving fast enough. He gathers the basketball team and begins hunting for Eddie themselves, convinced that satanic rituals are to blame, that the rumours about Hellfire Club were right all along. Eddie goes into hiding with help from his Uncle Wayne and his Hellfire friends, but he's terrified and alone, unable to explain what he saw without sounding insane. But Chrissy's death is only the beginning. The same thing happens to another student, Fred Benson, a newspaper writer who's been harbouring guilt over a car accident that killed his friend. Fred dies in the woods near the trailer park, his body found by Nancy, who was interviewing Eddie's uncle about Chrissy's death. The police and the town go into full panic mode. There's a killer loose in Hawkins, and the methods are so bizarre that people start believing Jason's theories about satanic cults. The fear spreads like a disease, neighbour turning against neighbour, everyone looking for someone to blame. Dustin, Steve, and the others realise that this is no ordinary killer. The way the victims die, the levitation and the broken bones, suggests something supernatural. They begin investigating, breaking into the school counsellor's office to review files on the victims, looking for any connection between them. What they find is chilling. Both Chrissy and Fred had been experiencing symptoms before their deaths. Headaches, nosebleeds, nightmares, visions. And according to the counsellor's notes, there's another student exhibiting the exact same pattern of symptoms, Max Mayfield. Max has been struggling since Billy's death, drowning in guilt and depression. She's been seeing the school counsellor regularly, trying to process her complicated feelings about her stepbrother's sacrifice. She loved him and hated him in equal measure, wished he would die and then watched him do exactly that to save her. The guilt is eating her alive, and she's been pulling away from her friends, isolating herself, listening to the same Kate Bush song on repeat like a lifeline to sanity. She's the perfect victim for what's hunting in Hawkins, and the monster has already marked her as its next target. The creature stalking Hawkins is something the group has never faced before, something that doesn't originate from the Upside Down, but has become part of it. Using their Dungeons & Dragons reference guide, they name it Vecna, after a powerful lich who feeds on the living. But Vecna is more than just a monster. It's intelligent, calculating, and it chooses its victims carefully. It hunts teenagers with trauma, with guilt, with deep psychological wounds that it can exploit. It traps them in visions drawn from their worst memories, torments them until their minds break, and then it kills them, using their deaths to open small gates to the Upside Down. Nancy and Robin, working together as investigators, track down a lead about a family who experienced something similar decades earlier. In the 1950s, a family named Creel moved into a large house in Hawkins. The father, Victor Creel, was a World War II veteran trying to give his family a fresh start. But almost immediately, strange things began happening in the house. Dead animals appeared on the property, birds that had slammed into the house and broken their necks. The family began having nightmares that felt too real. Victor's wife, Virginia, became convinced something evil lived in the house, something that was targeting their family. One night, everything came to a horrific head. Virginia was found dead at the dinner table, her body broken in the same way Chrissy and Fred would die decades later. The children, Alice and Henry, were also found dead, their eyes missing. Only Victor survived, and he was found with a razor blade, having attempted to gouge out his own eyes to avoid seeing the demon he believed had killed his family. Victor was convicted of murder and sent to a psychiatric hospital, where he's remained for over 30 years, still insisting a demon was responsible. Nancy and Robin, posing as psychology students, get access to Victor in the hospital. The old man tells them his story, describing the entity that terrorized his family. He calls it a demon, something ancient and evil that fed on their pain. He mentions one crucial detail. When the attack was happening, when he was trapped in visions of the war, he heard music playing on the radio in another room. His favourite song pulled him out of the nightmare, saved his life when everyone else in his family died. This gives the group a critical piece of information. Music can break Vecna's hold, can serve as an anchor to reality when the visions become overwhelming. When Max falls under Vecna's curse, trapped in the cemetery while visiting Billy's grave, the others remember Victor Creel's story. Dustin searches through Max's cassette tapes, frantically looking for her favourite song. They find it, Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill, the song she's been playing obsessively. Steve shoves the headphones onto Max's head and hits play. In the vision, Max is trapped in Vecna's nightmare realm, watching him approach with terrible purpose. But then she hears the music, faint at first but growing stronger. The sound cuts through the visions like a blade, and she runs, sprinting toward the source. In the real world, her friends see her body lift off the ground, her bones beginning to crack. But Max fights harder than any previous victim, driven by the music and by the voices of her friends calling her name. She breaks free at the last possible second, falling back to the ground and gasping for air. She is alive, but only barely, and Vecna will try again. While this is happening in Hawkins, Eleven's story takes a parallel track. After her arrest, she's rescued by Dr. Sam Owens, who explains that he needs her help. Something terrible is happening in Hawkins, something that only she might be able to stop, but she needs her powers back first. He's developed a program called Nina, a sensory deprivation tank connected to a system that will help her access her memories and potentially restore her abilities. Desperate to help her friends, Eleven agrees, and Owens takes her to a secret facility in the Nevada desert. At the facility, Eleven discovers that Dr. Brenner is still alive, having survived the Demogorgon attack in Season 1. She's terrified and furious, wanting nothing to do with the man who abused her for years, but Brenner insists he's trying to help her now, that he's learned from his mistakes. The Nina process involves Eleven reliving her past, experiencing memories she's repressed from her childhood at Hawkins Lab. She sees herself as a young girl, remembers the other children who were test subjects with her, remembers the strict routines and the painful experiments. Most importantly, she begins to remember a day in September of 1979. a day when everything changed. There was an orderly at the lab named Peter Ballard, a kind man who befriended young Eleven when the other children bullied her. Peter told her stories about her mother, encouraged her to stand up for herself, made her feel less alone. He reveals to her that he's actually a prisoner like the others, kept in line by a chip in his neck that suppresses his abilities. He asks Eleven to use her powers to remove the chip, to set him free, and she trusts him enough to do it. What happens next is a massacre. Peter, freed from his restraints, uses his considerable powers to systematically murder every other child in the lab. He kills the guards who tried to stop him. He kills Dr. Brenner's assistants. He kills everyone he can find, leaving the facility littered with corpses. Young Eleven, witnessing the slaughter, finally understands what she's done. Peter isn't a friend, he's something far worse. He explains his philosophy to her. Humanity is a plague, civilization is a prison, and he intends to remake the world in a better image. He invites Eleven to join him, to embrace the power they both possess and tear down everything together. Eleven refuses, and they fight. Despite being only 8 years old, despite Peter being far more experienced, Eleven taps into a wellspring of power driven by rage and betrayal. She doesn't just defeat him, she tears open a gateway to another dimension and hurls him through it. Peter tumbles through the tear in reality, falling through the red lightning and dark spaces of the Upside Down. As he falls, the dimension changes him, burns him, transforms him into something no longer entirely human. He crashes into the ground in a place that mirrors Hawkins but isn't, a dark reflection of the world he sought to destroy. And there, changed and twisted, he begins to rebuild himself. Peter Ballard was subject number 1 at Hawkins Lab, the first psychic child, the template for all the others. And Peter Ballard is Henry Creel, Victor's supposedly dead son, who had powers from birth, who murdered his mother and sister in a fit of rage, who was taken to the lab by Brenner and turned into the foundation of the entire program. And now, after years in the Upside Down, after transforming into something monstrous, Henry Creel has returned as Vecna. Every murder he commits opens a new gate. Every death brings him closer to his goal, opening enough gates that they'll connect, that they'll tear Hawkins apart and allow the Upside Down to consume the town completely. The group in Hawkins pieces together the truth about the Creel House, realises that Vecna's base of operations must be in the Upside Down version of his childhood home. They plan a two-pronged attack. Max will serve as bait, making herself vulnerable to draw Vecna out, while Steve, Nancy and Robin will enter the Upside Down through one of the gates and attack Vecna's physical body while he's distracted. It's dangerous and desperate, but they're out of options. Eddie Munson and Dustin volunteer to create a distraction, drawing away the swarms of demobats that guard Vecna's lair. In California, Joyce and Murray have been following the clues from the mysterious package Joyce received, the one with the Russian doll. It led them to Alaska, where they made contact with a pilot named Yuri Ismailov, who claimed he could help them. But Yuri betrays them, drugging them and taking them prisoner. He plans to turn them over to the Russian prison camp in Kamchatka for a reward, delivering them straight into the hands of the guards. But the plan goes wrong when their plane crashes in the frozen wilderness, and the survivors must work together to reach the prison camp, now united in their goal to free whoever the American prisoner is that was mentioned in the post-credits scene from Season 3. They make it to the camp and discover what they hoped. Jim Hopper is alive, though barely. He's been forced to fight a Demogorgon for the Russians' entertainment, the guards betting on how long prisoners will survive. Joyce and Murray stage a rescue, breaking Hopper out and fighting their way toward freedom. But they realise they can't just leave. The Russians have been keeping the Demogorgon for a reason, and if they're experimenting with creatures from the Upside Down, they might be planning to open another gate. Hopper decides they need to kill the Demogorgon and destroy the facility before they leave. The battle is brutal, Joyce and Hopper fighting side by side like they did at Hawkins Lab, Murray providing support with his knowledge of Russian military equipment. They succeed, destroying the facility and killing the creature, but it costs them time they don't have. Back in Hawkins, the plan against Vecna begins. Max sits in the Creel House, listening to her music, preparing herself to face the monster one more time. Vecna takes the bait, drawing her into his nightmare realm, showing her visions of everyone she loves dying, making her believe it's her fault. In the mindscape, Max faces a version of Billy who accuses her of wanting him to die, who tells her she enjoyed watching him suffer. Max nearly breaks, the guilt overwhelming, but she remembers her friends, remembers that Billy chose to save her, remembers that she's not alone. While Max struggles in the visions, Steve, Nancy, and Robin navigate the upside-down version of the Creel House. The place is a nightmare of vines and decay, every surface crawling with organic matter that pulses with hideous life. They find Vecna in the attic, suspended by tendrils, his body seemingly defenseless while his mind focuses on Max. They attack with Molotov cocktails and guns, and for a moment it seems to work. Vecna's body catches fire, and he screams in pain and rage. But he's more resilient than they anticipated. He breaks free from his trance, and his power lashes out, sending Nancy flying. He shows her a vision of the future he's planning, shows her Hawkins torn apart, the Upside Down bleeding into the real world, everyone she loves dead or transformed. Eddie and Dustin create their distraction by playing music, specifically Metallica's Master of Puppets, Eddie shredding on his guitar while standing on top of his trailer in the Upside Down. The sound attracts the Demobats in massive swarms, exactly as planned. They lead the creatures away from the Creel House, giving the others time to complete their mission. But when they retreat, back to the gate, Eddie makes a choice. He realises the Demobats will just follow them through, will attack their friends in the real world. Someone needs to keep them occupied, needs to buy more time. He cuts the rope connecting the two worlds and makes his stand in the Upside Down, fighting off the swarm with a makeshift spear and a trash can lid shield. He fights bravely, far braver than anyone ever gave him credit for, but there are too many creatures. The Demobats overwhelm him, tearing into his flesh, and Eddie Munson dies a hero, and though the town that hunted him will never know it. In Russia, the timing becomes critical. Joyce, Hopper, and Murray realise that something is happening, that the particles in the air are moving in strange patterns, responding to something far away. They make the connection. Vecna is connected to the Mind Flayer, is part of the same organism, and if he succeeds in Hawkins, it will affect the Upside Down everywhere. They need to help from where they are, need to do something to weaken the entity. They find a remaining piece of the Mind Flayer in the Russian facility, a fragment that the scientists have been studying, and they realise that if they can kill it, they might hurt Vecna too. They attack the creature with flamethrowers, burning it, and the effects ripple across dimensions. In the mindscape, 11 arrives. She's recovered her powers, has fought her way free from Brenner's facility. He dies trying to keep her there, killed by military helicopters that attack the Nevada base, and has used her abilities to piggyback into Max's mind. She confronts Vecna there, in the space between worlds, and they battle. It's a fight between the two most powerful psychics to ever exist, student and teacher, victim and abuser. Vecna is strong, fueled by years in the Upside Down and the deaths of his victims. But 11 is stronger, driven by love for her friends, by determination to protect them. She overpowers him, tears into his mind, gives the others in the real world the opening they need. Nancy, Steve and Robin hit Vecna with everything they have. They shoot him, burn him, tear apart his physical form. He falls from his perch, crashes through the window, and drops to the ground below. They approach cautiously, find his body smoking and apparently dead. For a moment they think they've won, but when they check again, the body is gone. Vecna has survived, has crawled away to heal and plan his revenge, and before they can pursue him, he completes his final kill. Max, back in the real world, is with Lucas when Vecna makes his last attack. Jason Carver has arrived, armed and convinced that Lucas is performing a satanic ritual on Max. They fight, and in the struggle, Max's Walkman is destroyed, cutting off her access to the music that could save her. Vecna pulls her back into his grip, and this time, he succeeds. Her bones break, her eyes cave in, and she dies in Lucas's arms while Jason watches in horror, finally understanding that the real evil in Hawkins was never human. Max's death opens the fourth and final gate, and the gates begin to merge, tearing through the centre of Hawkins in massive fractures that split the town like an earthquake. 11, using every ounce of power she has, reaches out across the distance and restarts Max's heart. Max comes back to life, but remains in a coma. Her mind nowhere to be found, trapped somewhere between worlds. Vecna has been wounded, but not killed. The gates are open, and the Upside Down is beginning to bleed through. Red lightning flickers in the sky over Hawkins. Ash falls like snow. The battle is over, but the war has only just begun. The road ahead. Themes and mythology. Through 4 seasons, Stranger Things has woven together horror and heart, creating a mythology that draws from Dungeons and Dragons, 80s pop culture, government conspiracy theories, and classic horror tropes while building something uniquely its own. At its core, the series is about the power of friendship and found family, about ordinary people finding extraordinary courage when the people they love are threatened. Mike, Dustin, Lucas, and Will started as a group of kids playing fantasy games in a basement, but they became heroes who've saved their town multiple times over. Nancy transformed from a girl caught between 2 boys into a determined investigator who refuses to stop asking questions. Steve evolved from a shallow bully into one of the series' most beloved characters, a protector and surrogate older brother to the younger kids. Joyce has proven that a mother's love is more powerful than any monster. Hopper discovered that he could love again after losing his daughter, could find purpose in protecting a strange girl who became his child. The Upside Down remains mysterious in many ways. It's a dark mirror of our world, frozen in time at the moment the first gate opened in 1983. It's hostile to human life, its air toxic, its vines infectious. The creatures that inhabit it range from the relatively simple Demogorgon, an apex predator following instinct, to the Mind Flayer, an ancient intelligence that views humanity as inferior and seeks to dominate or destroy it. Vecna adds another layer, revealing that the Upside Down can transform humans, can twist them into something monstrous if they possess the right kind of power. The relationship between Vecna and the Mind Flayer invites interpretation. Based on what we've seen, it's possible that Vecna is controlling the Mind Flayer, bending the dimension to his will after years of adapting to its environment. Another reading suggests he might be the Mind Flayer's most useful tool, a human face for an alien intelligence that predates his arrival. The show leaves this deliberately ambiguous, allowing viewers to draw their own conclusions about whether Vecna shaped the Upside Down or the Upside Down shaped him. The series has always been about nostalgia, specifically 1980s nostalgia. The Duffer Brothers have crafted a love letter to the era, filling every frame with references to the movies, music, and culture of the time. Steven Spielberg's influence is everywhere, from the bike riding kids to the sense of wonder mixed with terror. John Carpenter's horror sensibilities inform the atmosphere. Stephen King's small-town dread lurks in every corner, but the show never lets nostalgia become empty pastiche. The 80s it depicts aren't sanitised or idealised. They're a time of very real dangers. The Cold War's constant threat, the AIDS crisis beginning to devastate communities, the casual racism and homophobia that went largely unchallenged. The series acknowledges these elements while focusing on the universal themes that transcend any particular era. The importance of standing up for your friends, the courage it takes to face your fears, the power of choosing to be kind in a world that often isn't. As the series heads toward its final season, the stakes have never been higher. Hawkins is split open, the Upside Down invading in ways that can't be hidden or covered up. Max lies in a coma, her fate uncertain. Eddie is dead, branded a murderer by a town that will never know the truth. Hopper is finally reunited with Joyce and Eleven, but they're stuck in Russia with no easy way home. The group is scattered across the country, and bringing them back together will take time they might not have. Vecna survived his confrontation, wounded but still dangerous, and he's made his intentions clear. He won't stop until Hawkins is consumed, and everyone who opposed him is dead. But if 4 seasons have taught us anything, it's that the heroes of Hawkins don't give up. They've faced impossible odds before, and found ways to win. They've lost people they love, carried scars both visible and invisible, but they've never stopped fighting. The power of their friendships, the strength they draw from each other, has seen them through every crisis. One more battle remains. One final confrontation with the forces that have terrorised their town for years. And whatever happens, whatever the cost, they'll face it together. The story of Stranger Things is the story of growing up in a world that's darker and more complicated than it first appears, where adults don't always have the answers, where doing the right thing often comes at terrible cost. It's about finding your people, your chosen family, and holding on to them even when everything tries to tear you apart. It's about the moment when childhood innocence meets adult reality and somehow finds the courage to not look away. It's about small-town kids who became something legendary, who faced down nightmares and came out changed but not broken. As we wait for the final chapter, as we prepare to say goodbye to these characters who've meant so much, we're reminded that some stories resonate because they tap into something universal. Everyone has felt like an outsider at some point. Everyone has experienced loss, grief, the fear that the world is bigger and scarier than we can handle. Everyone has needed their friends to pull them back from darkness. Stranger Things takes those universal experiences and amplifies them through the lens of science fiction horror. But at its heart, it's always been about very human struggles. Growing up, finding your place, protecting the people you love, and refusing to let darkness win. The lights are flickering again in Hawkins, Indiana. The boundaries between worlds grow thinner by the day. Something ancient and terrible is preparing for one final assault. But somewhere in that beleaguered town, a group of friends is preparing too, gathering their strength, making their plans, ready to face whatever comes next. They've saved the world before. They'll find a way to do it again. Because that's what heroes do, even when those heroes are just kids from a small town in Indiana who happened to be in the right place at the right time, who happened to care enough to keep fighting when anyone else would run. The story continues, the battle goes on, and whatever happens in the end, we know one thing for certain. Strange things will keep happening in Hawkins until the very last page is turned. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the lore of Stranger Things, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more relaxing explorations of your favourite shows and stories. Sweet dreams, and remember, friends don't lie.